I believe that the fires we're cast upon are the flames we shall become. I believe in a common calling where our temples pray as one. I believe in the word of wonder and a kingdom for the saved.
Larry Pollock, Leo Mayrhofer here. Luke is on vacation in the Bahamas this week, so he'll be back next week. Today we have an interesting subject to cover. This is an old topic that will be familiar to a few of you, and it'll bring back some memories maybe. But for most people on here, I think it's going to be information that you're not aware of, things that happened before your time. There was a guy named John Little, who is a, quote, friend of Mike Mentzer, who wrote a book recently titled The True Story of Mike Mentzer. And in it, he gave his version of what he thought Mike Mentzer was about in his life. And I say his version, and what I mean by that is, in life, you know, we have different people we associate with, friends, acquaintances, and colleagues and whatnot. And we don't always show everybody everything. And from my understanding, in John Little's mind, Mike Mentzer was his friend. But John Little was Mike's training client. And I know with my training clients, I act in a professional way, or I try to anyways. And I try to stay primarily talking about business in their training. It doesn't get very real personal. And there's just, you interact with different people differently. My relationship with Mike was different in that, you know, we didn't have a formal training. He was a mentor in a way, but he was like my training partner, my roommate, my friend. We'd hang out. It wasn't you know, I'd meet him 3 days a week for a training session. I lived with the guy for damn near a year. So I think I got to see parts of Mike that other people didn't see. And I think he probably told me things that he probably didn't tell other people, because you're obviously not going to talk about certain things with everybody. That being said, I want to start back from the beginning. A lot of people know about the 1980 Olympia, when Arnold Schwarzenegger all of a sudden popped into the scene, showed up the day of the show, entered the show, and won the show very controversially. A lot of people disagreed with it. Going into that show, Mike Mentzer was a favorite to win the show, and he ended up getting like fifth or some ridiculous thing. Mike was in the best shape of his life. Arnold was a little bit off. They even had a big argument, almost got in a fist fight prior to the show starting. So people know of the rivalry between Arnold Schwarzenegger and Mike Mentzer, but it goes a lot deeper than that. Before the rivalry between Schwarzenegger and Mentzer, there was a different rivalry between Joe Wieder and a guy named Arthur Jones. Arthur Jones was the inventor of Nautilus, and they were very, very different personality-wise. Their philosophies were completely different. Their backgrounds were different. They were polar opposites of each other. Joe Wieder was born in Canada, and he wanted to be a bodybuilder, but he never really was a bodybuilder. In fact, this is an actual true story. When I was a kid in Don Peters' gym, which later turned into a Gold's Gym in Reseda, California, I used to hang out with a group of bodybuilder kids. And one day The guy came in a tracksuit, and he had about, I don't know, 135 pounds on a bar, and he went and did a few sets of squats. Actually, I don't think he was in a few sets. I think he did like one set of a bunch of reps, and then he turned around and walked upstairs. And I was talking to my friends, and I said, "That's Joe Wieder." And they're like, "No, that's not Joe Wieder. Joe Wider's buff." And I'm like, no, I think that's him. I think I was 14 years old. But, the way I would just go up to anybody. So I went up to the locker room, and right when I went into the locker room, he was actually coming out of the shower with a towel around his waist, and he was obese. He didn't have any muscle on him, just fat hanging everywhere. And I walked up to him and I said, "Hey, you're Joe Wieder, aren't you?" And he goes, "No, I'm his brother." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I walked downstairs, and the manager working at the desk was Ray Mentzer. And I asked, Ray Boone. He was a Mr. America. And I said, "Ray, isn't that Joe Wieder up there?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I said, "He said he was his brother." He said that. I'm like, "Yeah, that's what he said." He goes, "No, that's him." Anyways, why is this relevant? Well, Joe Wieder had a famous statue where he's like this, all buff, and it was in all the magazines. It was Robbie Robinson's body with his head imposed onto it because he thought Robbie had like the perfect body. Of course, it was all in like dark colors, so you couldn't, tell who it was unless you knew Robbie's body. And Joe Wieder promoted himself as, he called himself the Master Blaster, trainer of champions. And he said he trained all the top bodybuilders, and he had the Wieder training principles. And there were all kinds of different principles. He had super sets and giant sets. And one of the things he had was muscle confusion. He said in one of his philosophies, or I shouldn't say his, first of all, Joe Wieder didn't have any principles. He just took whatever bodybuilders were doing, called it his, and, said it was a Wieder principle. Mm-hmm. So muscle confusion, the idea was if you got to change the exercises around all the time so the muscles are confused, and, therefore they're going to stimulate growth in a different way. So every workout should be different. The only confusion was in the heads of bodybuilders because muscles don't think. They understand one thing: force generated through contraction and extension. That's all muscles do: contract and expand. They don't understand the difference between whether you're curling a barbell, a machine, a brick. They only understand how much force they need to generate.
Yeah, but that it's true. It's true from that standpoint. But if you think about it, I mean, if you change exercises, your body doesn't know the exercise in a way that it's a little different. So it'll hit whatever your tricep a little different, and you will definitely get a soreness from the same intensity that you wouldn't get if you're used to an exercise. Let's say you never do overhead extensions, and you do push downs and push downs and push downs, and then you start implementing overhead extensions, and you do 3 hard sets, you'll be like sore as hell. So
the reason is because when you change the angle of an exercise, you might be hitting different muscle fibers from
exactly. That's what I was saying. I just wanted to say it's not like totally stupid to change exercises. Sometimes.
No, it's not. I'm not saying it's totally stupid to change exercise, but the idea that you have to change your exercises every workout is ridiculous because some movements just work better than others, and you can do the same exercise and keep getting results. And you might get sore from something, and soreness does not automatically equal growth.
Yeah.
So
who was that? There's some bodybuilders that claim they've done the same stuff for 10 years and they got better and better and better.
Yeah, me.
Yeah.
And lots of other people too. Some exercises just work better than others.
Yeah.
But the squat is probably the best exercise for most people for overall leg development, whether you do it on a Smith machine or a barbell or some other type of machine.
Do you know the true squat?
Yes.
Like we have one here at Fit Club, and I've been implementing it lately. I just trained with Luke. We did it too. That was cool. We trained legs. And that was really great exercise. Whoa, that's amazing. Like you can go real deep. And the thing is, I can go so deep that the machine ends. So I can truly fail and I can't like screw up my knees, because some machines, when you fail, like your knees would break through like Jean-Pierre Fuchs, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so I can go deep enough. It's an amazing exercise, but keep going. Sorry.
But again, like a squat is a basic movement, and you could do squats whether on a machine or with a barbell for year after year after year and continue to get results. And you may not get sore every single time, but as long as you're getting stronger at it, you're going to grow muscle. So anyways, but that's not the point. The muscle confusion is just one of his quote principles. The truth of the matter is, he just took whatever bodybuilders were doing in the gym, called it a Wieder principle. And he used that to sell barbells, Wieder weight sets. And I know because my father bought me one of those. That's how I started training, on a Wieder weight set. They were cement plates in plastic with like a little cheap bar and a bench. It came in a little kit.
Didn't it come with like a poster where the exercises were on that you could do?
Maybe, I don't remember. I was 13 when I got it. My father got it for me, and I set it up in my living room. Yeah. And I would bench press to failure and then roll it off my stomach and pick it up, put it back, and start over again. But anyways, he was selling these barbells. All of a sudden, you got this guy, Arthur Jones, comes out. If you're not familiar with Arthur Jones was eccentric. He was a bit of a lunatic, but he was a genius when it came to exercise. He was way, way ahead of his time. Yeah, I just talked about John Little. We discussed
it.
Anyways, he was way ahead of his time, and he did. First of all, he was a self-made millionaire before anything to do with Nautilus or weights. He had a program that like a television program that filmed wild animals in Africa, and he was involved in this big conservation thing with wild animals, and like he moved elephants all the way across Africa for conservation purposes. He did all kinds of stuff. So this guy was incredibly talented, but he had been lifting weights for his own, passion for it. And some people are what I call mechanically inclined, and they just have a different way of thinking. And what I mean by that is, some people can understand things. Some people can't understand things, but some people have a way of thinking that they can just, when it comes to mechanics and machinery or anything, they can just do it. Example of this, when I was in Mexico, I bought 2 pill presses. If anybody's ever tried to run a pill press, they're not easy. One of them was really difficult. You had to set the pressure a certain exact way. And me and my friend would try to run the pill press, and inevitably it would jam after 20 or 30 minutes of using it. Well, there was a Mexican guy there, didn't speak one word of English, and he worked for a guy that owned the properties there, and he was a maintenance guy. He was just a maintenance guy. He fixed things. He was a fixer, fixed cars, fixed anything. But this guy could do anything mechanical. Any kind of machinery, he could fix it. He could make it work. Well, I hired him to run my pill presses because he could run that thing like a violin or a sewing machine. I mean, he just run that thing for hours, and it would just spit out pills. It never jammed. He just had a way of doing it. Some people are just like that. Arthur Jones had a way of looking at things and designing things in ways that most people couldn't comprehend. And when he designed the Nautilus machine, I think he said he went over like literally hundreds of thousands of designs and prototypes trying to come up with he had an idea in his head that there was something different that needed to be done, but it took literally, he spent years and years and years. And he said at one point he stopped publishing or talking about anything for 7 years straight. And he said the reason was because he had nothing, he had come to a point where he had nothing new to talk about. And for 7 years, he was spinning his wheels, trying to figure out a better way to build something to make it work better. And then he finally developed what he called the cam, which is on a Nautilus machine, which creates what we call variable resistance. In other words, it changes the resistance throughout the range of motion.
Oh, what's Strive and now Prime have? He was the first guy to do that?
Arthur was the first person to make the cam that are used in all modern machines that you see in a gym were originally an offshoot of some sort of Nautilus. He was the first one to do that. And he developed that between him and his son. He was actually working with an idea of a wheel of some sort. And then his son came up with the idea of the cam. And then they built the cam and they figured out variable resistance and they made it work. He was way, way ahead of his time. And just to give you guys an idea of Arthur Jones, I want to play like a really brief clip of him speaking, just so you guys kind of get an understanding of the kind of person he was, because he was a different kind of a person. I'm going to pull this up real quick.
When did he die?
I'm not sure of the exact date, actually.
Perhaps instead of trying to determine how much exercise we can tolerate, perhaps we should be trying to find out how little exercise we actually require. Now, I'm certainly not against exercise, but to be of value, exercise must involve overload. If it doesn't, you're wasting your time. Once you have learned to spell your name, then no amount of practice sitting at a table writing your name thousands and thousands or millions of times will improve either your spelling or your vocabulary. He said, perhaps instead of trying to determine how much exercise
He sounded a little bit like Joe Wieder, but not as squeaky. Yeah. I mean, that's true, of course, obviously. Yeah, that's the philosophy of the heavy duty, right?
Yes, but
overload.
Gotta remember,
and do as little as you can. As little as
remember,
required.
this was back in the 1970s.
Yeah. Like no one was thinking about that.
He was the
Everyone
first
was
one
thinking
to,
like more is better.
he was the first one to come up with this. And Mentzer was really Mike Mentzer was a disciple of Arthur Jones. Now, later on, they had slight conflict in their idea of frequency of training, but for the most part, they were in agreement. And
what was Jones asking for more frequency?
Well, Jones' idea that he first came up with was to do one set per body part, whole body workout 3 times a week. Mike later said that, some people can't recover that fast. And he wanted to do a split routine, which worked different body parts, different times in the week. And usually doing each body part every 4 days, but for some people as infrequent as 10 days, depending on their ability to recover. And he took into fact that different genetics, people had different abilities to recover from different training intensities. They were both in agreement with the high intensity, low volume, though,
yeah,
which was diametrically opposed to Arnold Schwarzenegger and Joe Wieder, which was very high volume. Now, Wieder saw Arthur Jones as a real threat to his business and his legacy, because Wieder was selling barbells and his training principles. And here comes Arthur Jones with Nautilus equipment and a completely different training philosophy, which was lower volume and higher intensity instead of the high volume.
Yeah.
So he was a huge threat. And
so I see. So he can't have the guy training like that win the Olympia.
Exactly. And
Yeah,
and what Mike didn't understand until the 80 Olympia was he was on the wrong team as far as politically correct. He was on Team Jones. And Mike was on Team Jones because Mike, as soon as he learned from Arthur, he admitted himself that it all made sense to him and he agreed with it.
So he could have just went on after 1980 and just claimed, I switched to high volume training. Boom, he would have won 81 against Franco.
I don't know if at that point that was an option, but
maybe too late. Yeah, but just saying.
But in 79, a lot of people argued, he won the heavyweight at the Olympia. At that time, it was two classes. Zane won the lightweight, and then Zane beat him for the overall.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people felt like Mike Mentzer should have won the overall. Somebody said Mike Mentzer could have jumped on board with Wieder and pushed his BS training principles. That's true. Yeah, Mike stuck with what he believed was true.
Well, I want to defend that though. Like, sure, if you overtrain, high volume is not necessarily BS. Supersets are not necessarily BS. Like, look at Jay Cutler, for example, and some other techniques. They're not bullshit. Like, heavy duty is not the only way to train. If that would be true, like if that would be the case, then like most of the guys nowadays would train like bullshit. I don't know if you could really say that.
Well, regardless of all that, after Mike Mentzer came with his principles, volume drastically went down, intensity drastically went up. Mm-hmm. Franco was actually a fan of Arthur Jones. Both Franco and Arnold visited Arthur Jones in his complex in DeLand, Florida. He had a huge complex where he would bring people and train them on his Nautilus equipment. And Franco ended up staying a little bit. Arnold did a couple workouts with him and said himself that though they were too hard, and if he had to train like that, he just wouldn't want to train. Franco stayed longer. He liked the training, and he ended up going home with a couple pieces of Nautilus equipment, the Nautilus Super Pullover and a bicep tricep machine. So Franco was into it. Arnold was not. But anyways, regardless, it was a conflict of interest to have Mike Mentzer win the Olympia, because again, he was not preaching weight or training principles. He was preaching Arthur Jones training principles. He was not preaching barbells. He was preaching Nautilus equipment. And I can say the year that I trained with him, we almost exclusively did Nautilus equipment. Now, I'm not saying that barbells and dumbbells don't have a place. They do. But he really preached. I mean, we trained on Nautilus equipment that whole year. And I actually grew from it quite a lot doing that type of training. So there was a financial incentive for Arnold to be the winner and basically squash Mike Mentzer and Arthur Jones from going forward on the side of Joe Wieder. And things were very political back then. And that gets us into, after the 80 Olympia, Mentzer saw the writing on the wall. But I think before that, he kind of felt like, what's fair is fair and right's going to overcome evil. And if he's the best one up there, he's going to eventually win. And I know because I used to be like that too. And then reality hit that he got screwed and he was never going to win. They were not going to let him win, no matter under any circumstances, because he was on the opposite team. And that had a huge effect on Mike psychologically. And I don't care what anybody says. I lived with him for a year, and I can't remember a single day when he didn't bitch about Arnold Schwarzenegger. And I remember one time, he said to me, I don't give a shit about Arnold. And I said, well, for somebody who doesn't give a shit, you sure talk about him an awful lot. And he did not like that, because he was always just angry. And this is I trained with him in, I want to say it was like 80. Let's see. I was 19 years old, 66, 85. So it was 1985. And this is 5 years after the 80 Olympia. He was still angry. I remember actually Mike in one of the closets where we lived. I opened the closet one day and there was these huge posters of Mike from his competing. Someone made these like giant framed posters. And me being a fan of Mike, I thought they were so cool. I hung them up all over the apartment. He came home and saw that and flipped out. He didn't want to see it. He didn't want to think about the 80 Olympia. He took them down right away. He was angry that I did that. And I thought I was like doing a good thing, because I looked up to him like I was a kid, and he was like one of my heroes. So another thing that people don't realize is there was a lot of weird stuff went on in bodybuilding over the years, politically. And I will just say it straight. I don't know how to say it any other way. There was a lot of gay stuff going on, especially in LA. And I know because I was right in the middle of it and saw it all the time. There was an unknown saying that, like, if you wanted to win a title, probably you had to do something. Joe Wieder was flaming homo. I don't care what anybody says. I used to drive people to the photo shoots because Mike, I had a car and I had time on my hands. So Mike would have me drive people to the photo shoots. Okay. And Joe would be like, let me put on the oil. Let me put on the oil. And he'd be rubbing oil on all these guys. And I always thought it was like kind of creepy. But, it is what it is. So I don't personally think that Mike was gay in the fact, I don't know, but he had a girlfriend the whole time I knew him, and he never seemed gay in the way of like he liked men. But I do know this. When I met Mike, he was flat broke. He had no money. And I know this because he asked me to move in with him. And then the day I moved in with him, he said, by the way, you need to pay the rent and buy the food. Because I was actually working, and all he was doing is writing an article for Wieder, and Wieder gave him like a couple $100 a month for writing an article, which was not enough to pay the rent and the food. And he had no other source of income. I know this because he didn't do anything else. He would just write these articles for the magazine that came out once a month.
And he transported 4 times a week, and he's too lazy to work.
He did not work. I at the time was bouncing in nightclubs in Hollywood, and I was selling steroids. So I paid the rent. I paid for our food. I paid for everything. And, Mike just didn't have any money. And I don't think it was a lazy thing. I think it was more of like he was in such a depression that he just didn't care. I mean, prior to that, he was selling his material and his books and his stuff, and he could have still been doing that, but he just wasn't. When I met Mike, he wasn't even working out. He was like when I first met Mike, I was introduced to him by a guy named Brian Sutton, who was a big steroid dealer down there. And I was shocked. he was this little guy with like 13-inch arms with a pot belly. He looked tiny. I was way bigger than him, and I was I just turned 19, and I was much bigger than him. But then, I convinced him. I wanted him to train with me, so I convinced him to train with me. And I kid you not, in 3 months, he went from that to just massive. Mm-hmm. We'd go to Gold's Gym, and he'd just be like bigger than everybody. He was super wide. Everything was just huge in 3 months. His muscle memory was crazy. And, he wasn't eating like the best diet either. We would go to after workout, we'd go to something called Whole Foods restaurant, and they served these little rolls with these little sweet butters. And he would just take one roll of butter and pop it on a roll and pop it in his mouth. And he would just eat them like candy. And he would eat butter. He'd put butter in the freezer and eat it like ice cream with a spoon. He liked his fat.
That doesn't sound good.
No, but even doing that, he blew up. He just, right before my eyes, he transformed into this monster. And we were doing the high intensity training. Now, Mike did have a problem with amphetamines. And, you can say whatever you want. A lot of people were taking amphetamines back then, cocaine and other things. But, it was a tradition. Before we went to work out, we had to drive all the way from West Hollywood to, it was Reseda, I think it was, where the meth dealer was, who was my friend, a guy named Joe. We drive all the way there to get the meth. And then we drive all the way back to Studio City, which was like back towards where we were at, to go train at the Nautilus Plus in Studio City. At that time, they had a thing called Nautilus Plus. There were gyms, all Nautilus equipment. They were just completely Nautilus. And there was a chain of them. They went on for quite a few years. And most of the time we trained, once in a while we went to Gold's, but majority of the time we trained at Nautilus's. And specifically that one in Studio City, because he just liked going there. I don't think he really liked training at Gold's at that point. He didn't want to be in the bodybuilding scene. Even when he got huge, he just didn't want to be around it. So, anyways, there was a huge financial thing behind all of that. The Wieder versus Arthur Jones. And if you ever have a chance, like listen to some of Arthur Jones' videos of him talking, and the guy was just amazingly smart, but he's a bit crass. And a lot of people would not like the way he speaks. He's very blunt and to the point, and he'll say things like, people are stupid. These people are stupid. You don't know what you're talking about. He's sort of like a Trump. He'll just call people stupid. And some people have a problem with that. I don't, because he's telling the truth. He's just saying, what he believes is true. But he was a total genius with his understanding of exercise physiology. Was way ahead of its time. And I think he just had an understanding of exercise biomechanics and the way muscles worked that I don't think anybody even to this day has the same exercise understanding. There's different philosophies. I know Mike Zotel has his own ideas and some other people have their own ideas, but he just really understood things. And the fact that he was able to design the Nautilus machines out of just ideas in his head. And then he spent years making prototypes and redesigning. Just shows you, I mean, if you look at a Nautilus machine, how advanced it is with the cam and the variable resistance. And if you understand all that went into it, to develop that thing, it is a genius. Yeah. And somebody said, yeah. And that's another thing. Someone said, genius don't try to be liked. Arthur Jones did not give a rat's ass what anybody thought about him. That was pretty obvious when he'd speak. He was not interested in being popular. He could give a shit. That was the opposite of Joe Wieder, who was a magazine publisher.
I mean, that's every time you come up with something that goes against the common traditional narrative, that you're going to be disliked or ousted or hated or nailed on the cross. It's like
Exactly.
people, like, there's always enemies of the truth. If you consider like Arthur Jones speaking the truth or not, so if you go against the narrative, there's always people going to hate you, and it's going to make you also a little more, if you don't not crazily patient, it's going to make you more aggressive. And that's probably why he said, "Oh, you're stupid," because people just are so in their ways and not open to learning new things, or to maybe questioning their own narrative, or admitting that they've been wrong. That always is gonna, offend people. And nowadays, I mean, everybody's offended by everything. So he would do badly nowadays.
Oh, he would be, just the way he was, he would be hated by every Democrat and most other people, just because of the way he spoke.
Yeah.
He just would say what he thought, and he didn't give a shit what people thought about it. And he would say, this is what's correct. And he would call all the other people that were selling other types of techniques that didn't work frauds. And he was right. There was people there was one guy he was talking about was selling a certain type of exercise technique, and that was based, it just didn't work. Anyways, the guy was actually indicted for fraud like several times, and still he was a multi-millionaire frauding people with his bullshit. And Arthur would flat out call the guy out. I don't remember his name, but it's in one of his videos. And my first learning of Arthur Jones was from Mike. Mike would tell me about Arthur, and he said Arthur was a maniac. He said Arthur always packed a gun, and he would shoot you just because. He was like a little crazy like that. But it was a different time, These were back in, post-war era, and, he was a world traveler, traveled all over the world, doing animal conservation and different things. And he was just a different person. And
I wouldn't say Wieder and Arnold.
So he would just call people.
The guy here said Wieder and Arnold were frauds. I mean, their training principles weren't. It's not fraudulent. It's working. It might not be the best, and but you could say Wieder is a fraud.
Well, Wieder
claims that it's his
I will say this.
But Arnold being a fraud.
Wieder was a fraud in the fact that he claimed that
exactly
all those Wieder principles were his ideas.
Yeah.
Because he didn't even lift weights.
Yeah.
They weren't his ideas. He didn't train anybody. He just, whatever bodybuilders were doing in the gym, he called it the Wieder principle.
Yeah.
Where they came up with those types of trainings, who knows? Bodybuilders over the years came up with different training techniques, and he just called them all the Wieder principle.
Yeah.
And in his magazines, he called it the Wieder principle.
Yeah.
So in that regard, Wieder was kind of a fraud, because he didn't train Arnold. He didn't train anybody. He took pictures with them. He promoted them, but he didn't teach them how to work out.
Yeah. Sure.
Arthur Jones, on the other hand, was the guy that was actually like taking people and putting them on his Nautilus machines and teaching them how to train. So it was a totally, completely different dynamic right there.
Yeah.
Arthur Jones was the real deal in that he actually developed the techniques, he developed the equipment, and he was actually he brought all the famous bodybuilders from those times to his place in Florida and trained them. Pretty much everybody who was any good went there at some point and trained.
But these guys went, do you know if they went there on their own dime?
That I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that. How would I know that?
Yeah, I just wonder, maybe someone would have told you back then. I don't know.
No,
if
I
they,
don't think I don't. But you know what? I don't think he had to pay people, because I think bodybuilders, wanted to know like what this guy was doing. It was so different.
I would imagine that too. I was just wondering if you knew or not. Yeah.
Well, I know there was a Casey Viator thing, where Casey was a oil rig worker, and he had not lifted weights in like a couple of years. He just stopped lifting weights and went and worked on an oil rig. And Arthur paid him, I'm guessing, but I don't know for sure, but I think so. And he brought Casey from the oil rig and had him do a high intensity training principle with the Nautilus equipment, where he ate a ton of food. And he claimed that Casey was natural, but I would probably think Casey was probably taking some gear.
Yeah.
But regardless, Casey put on like some ridiculous amount of muscle. It was like 30 or 60 pounds of muscle in like 40 days, something like this. But it was regrowth. Casey was once upon a time,
exactly,
that size, and then he hadn't trained in a couple of years, and now he just came back to it and put that muscle back on in a hurry. But that was one of his big experiments. And they said he was on no drugs. I tend to think he probably was on some steroids to even though it was regrowth, to make that kind of progress that fast. But he did document the progress.
Yeah.
And when Arnold came back in 1980, part of that was just to stop Mike Mentzer because if Mike Mentzer had won the 80 Olympia, he was fully promoting high intensity training and Arthur Jones. He was not promoting Joe Wieder and the Master Blaster training principles.
Yeah.
He just wasn't. It's interesting because, Arthur Jones had plenty of money, but Joe owned the magazines. So Joe had the ability to promote. And that's how he pushed his narrative, basically.
Yeah, well, it was also Joe Wider's Olympia, so
yeah, it was his show.
His show.
Yeah, he made the show, he owned the show, and he owned the magazine. So he had the audience.
I don't even want to say it, but in a way, then it's actually really good that he, isn't around anymore, or stopped influencing that with all the other brands and everything being way more open. It's almost like you have a one-party system, right? And then all of a sudden you have a democracy with all these parties, like a real democracy with all these parties. And then like, you can't just be like, well, it's just going to go my way. So I think that is obviously, so at which point do you think the Olympia got less political in terms of who's winning, like in the 90s? I mean, okay, Lee Haney was actually an obvious winner. They wouldn't have to rig anything, I think, for Lee Haney.
Well, Lee Haney was an obvious winner, but he was also a Wieder guy.
Yeah.
I mean, I was there when Joe brought Lee and Rich Gasperi out before they were pro even, and put them under a Wieder contract.
Yeah.
I think they both just won Teen America, and he brought them out to the gym. And Rich was working the front desk of the Golds in Northridge, and Lee and him were both doing construction. And then Wieder put him under a Wieder contract. And so they were like Team Wieder right from the get-go.
Yeah.
So they were all on board with that, and it was interesting back in those days. Joe Gold had shut down Gold's gym, and then Gold's opened up with Ed Connors and Pete Grimkowski. And then Joe opened up World Gym. And guess where all the Wieder bodybuilders went and trained? They went and trained at Worlds with Joe Gold. And I know because I went there and trained there too.
I know. Yeah, it's funny.
And so you had at Gold's Gym in Venice, you had Mike Christian, Tom Platz. I think Frigna went back and forth. But almost everybody else was at Worlds. Because it was like Joe Gold and Team Wieder. and they did the photo shoots a lot of times at Worlds. So you'd go into Worlds, you'd have, Arnold would be in there, and Lee would be there, Rich Gaspari would be there. Pretty much almost 99% of the pro bodybuilders were training at Worlds at the time. And Worlds was a little tiny gym compared to Gold's.
Was that on Main Street?
I think so. It was literally 2 blocks away from Gold's.
Yeah, I think I know where it was.
Yeah, you could walk from Worlds over to Gold's. It was that close.
Yeah.
But they had like a little outdoor deck, and Joe Gold built all the equipment in his gym. Like, he was a welder, and it was like mostly cable pulleys and stuff like that. So I don't remember seeing any Nautilus equipment in his gym. He built like different cables. It was not Icarian, but it was sort of Icarian-like, he had the big metal flywheels for the cables. It was really well-built equipment, though. But a lot of free weights and just mostly cables.
Yeah.
And so I would think that, probably it didn't change. I think it probably didn't change till Wieder passed, and it changed hands. And that's when change could start to happen, because until then, Joe Wieder had a lock on the Olympia.
Yeah. You still his fingers in there, huh?
Yeah. I mean, everybody was under Wieder contract, which means if you're a pro bodybuilder, you worked for Wieder pretty much if you wanted to make money. And he ran all the shows. So he had a monopoly on bodybuilding for probably as long as he was alive. And
it's interesting though, because Dorian trained Mentzerish, right? And he still won these Olympias.
He did, but by that point, even though they tried to stop the Mentzer philosophy, they couldn't stop it. It was just Nautilus equipment became too popular. Too many people were following Mike Mentzer. I mean, even Samir Bannout followed Mike Mentzer. Boyer Coe followed Mike Mentzer. A lot of the guys just started training high intensity. He changed the game. By the time Dorian got in there, that was a decade later, after Lee Haney had finished running his reign of Olympias. And, at that point, the training principles were no longer pushing like the Master Blaster Joe Wieder formula the same. Now
they were more into the supplements and magazines, right?
Right. He was more into supplements and magazines. He wasn't selling, the Wieder barbells as like a main source of income anymore. So, and in a way, Dorian was on Team Wieder, and because he obviously had to play ball with Joe. But Joe saw the value in Dorian as somebody to promote, basically. I think there was an interview with Kevin Levrone where he said he had a meeting with Joe Wieder, and Joe told him flat out, like, Dorian is more
marketable
than you are.
Yeah, he said something about a magazine. If I put you on and if I put him on, and what's going to be the outcome, and then
So I mean, at that point, the training principles had taken such a hold in bodybuilding that I don't think Joe cared at that point anymore. It was like he was now the biggest magazine publisher, and he owned the Olympias, and that was it.
Yeah.
So it wasn't as big of a conflict as it was in the 70s and the early 80s, as it became later down the road. Do I agree that Kevin should have won Mr. Olympia over Dorian? I don't know. Maybe. I
rather would say Sean Ray should have won, even though
I think there was at least one Olympia that Sean should have won.
Yeah, I think 96.
Yeah.
I don't remember. I think 96. 97 was such a bad Olympia. Everyone was bad. Such a bad Olympia.
Yeah, I think there was one Olympia where Dorian was like torn bicep.
Yeah, that was the last one.
And his midsection was not very good. And, you know, Sean was just like on point on everything.
That was kind of like this year, where, you know, Derek only won because the others also didn't bring their best, like Hadi and Samson, right?
Mm-hmm.
So Dorian in 97, if the other guys would have all been spot on, if Nasser would have had not a chubby back, you know, because he was soft from the back. Like he won the front shots, but he turns around and he's actually pretty soft. Like there's other guys, like they kind of lost the Olympia more than he won it. Because, you know, maybe they would have still given it to him politically, I don't know. But if I imagine the others being at 100%, and they would have still given it to Dorian, ooh. So they definitely messed up. Like, even if they say, oh, that was political, Nasser should have won. It's like, yeah, Nasser, but you weren't at 100%. So, you know, it's kind of like weird if someone complains not to have won when he's a little off, you know. But yeah,
I don't know that Nasser was off. I just don't think he ever had a great back.
Now the back was not dry. He was dry from the front, but he was not shredded from the back. Dorian was way harder from the back, way harder.
Was he ever shredded from the back? I don't remember that he was.
Yeah, I mean, neither. But I'm just saying, I mean, of course he can, you know. So,
I just don't think from the back he had the depth and the thickness and
the
graininess of Dorian. But from the back, you know, it was a night and day. Yeah. I mean, from the front.
Yeah, but if he had been in better shape, the back would have looked better.
Someone said Sean was great until he stood next to Dorian. Same with Kevin. That's not true. There was, at that last Olympia, Sean stood right next to Dorian, and man, he gave him a run for his money for sure.
You know, it's also crazy when Jean-Pierre Fuchs stood next to Dorian. Dorian looked small. JP was massive. It's so sad that he didn't have the right people in his corner and the mindset, because he could have beat him actually. But yeah, he didn't nail it. He was like, did everything himself, and he messed it up all the time.
Well, you know, Dorian, when he was at his best, was unbeatable in a couple of Olympias. Yeah, and they used to have a saying back in those days: you can't just beat the king; you have to knock him out.
Yeah, I know. 96, 97, I'm talking. That's when he could have been beat, but still wasn't.
But it wasn't enough to beat him. You had to like demolish him.
Yeah.
If you were just better, that wasn't good enough. You were gonna.
I like that. I like that nowadays that they're like, no, if you're a little better, then you still win. You know, they're like, we don't care. You know, look at the scores. It was 7-8 between Hadi and Derek. They're not like, oh, you have to, you know, be the certain way. I mean, okay, it wasn't between those guys, so no one was the reigning Mr. Olympia of those guys. But yeah, still, that I really like that. Nowadays, it's way more interesting. I remember when Phil Heath was Mr. Olympia, and I was like, can someone this year? And then he comes out, and I'm like, okay, I can turn the TV off.
Well, you have to realize something. Nowadays, there's no financial incentive tied to one athlete being the winner versus another, because there's no magazines anymore. There's no warrior contracts.
You could say that for someone like Bumstead winning over, you know, Terrence Ruffin or someone that there's a big difference there. But I don't think besides his first win, I think his wins were all right. The first one he shouldn't have won, Bumstead. But yeah.
Well, I mean, there could be some small amount of politics involved, but it's not like there's one entity or body that has a monopoly on it. I don't think the Manions get paid extra from something if somebody wins over another.
Yeah, they also want to be careful because everyone's watching. Nowadays, there's so much more media and so much more talk and footage. It's not like in the 80s where you can just,
Well, back then, a contest would happen and most people wouldn't know about it till the magazine came out a month later.
Yeah. And who puts the pictures in the magazine? You could
I
take the
know
worst pictures of Mentzer and the best ones of Arnold and put them in.
We would know about it because we were at World Gym and Gold's, and like somebody from there would call the gym and tell us,
Yeah. I heard that people were saying, like, after the Olympia, like at Gold's Gym at the reception, everyone would call them to be like, so who won the Olympia? And the reception is like, the receptionist on the phone all day telling people who won the Olympia.
How did the Manions go from running the IFBB from Joe? Well, Joe sold the Olympia to what was that? What was that thing before what's his name owns it? There was whatever
AMC, whatever.
Yeah, it was a magazine publishing company that ran it for a few years. So Joe sold it to them. And basically, the magazines were shutting down because magazines were like, basically died out.
I think when was that? 2004 or so?
I don't remember the exact year.
Something like that.
Right around the time the magazines were going under, they sold it to AMI. AMI was the company.
Exactly, not AMC.
Yeah, so when AMI had it, like they were just a magazine publishing company. They actually bought Muscle and Fitness and Flex and the Olympia all in one package. So they became the new owners of it, but they were just magazine publishers. They didn't they weren't in bodybuilding. They didn't give a shit who won. They didn't really, they weren't invested in bodybuilding. It was just a business venture for them. It was already established. The magazines were established. Olympia was established. They took it on as a straight up business thing. So I think it was about that time when the Manions were able to kind of more do what they wanted.
Do we have some questions, guys? Ask some questions, and we're gonna answer. Can be any topic on the planet.
I think there was questions up in the beginning, but we were talking.
Okay.
But yeah, if you guys have any other questions about this or anything else.
Do you know if Joe retired a billionaire?
I don't know that. I don't know his net worth. I'm sure we could look it up in 5 seconds.
Yeah, well, I don't know how accurate is that going to be.
Yeah, that's true.
There's so much. There's such hilarious numbers out there sometimes.
Yeah, but I mean, he did take bodybuilding from kind of an obscure sport to, I wouldn't say mainstream, but to the point where it was through his magazine publishing. So in that regard, Joe did a lot of good for bodybuilding.
Oh yeah. Exactly what I just thought about. It's like a lot of people in the comments were hating on him. He's a fraud and everything. We're all very holy when it comes to judging others. What would you guys have done in Joe's position? Would you have gotten let the other guy get away with his principles and such? And he did actually, the outcome, the result for bodybuilding, Joe and Arnold, what they both did, I mean, we can just thank them, actually. Sure, they did some things that weren't cool, and we can point them out, but we should also mention the good sides, I think.
Yeah.
It's like nowadays when they all say, oh, Thomas Jefferson was a slaveholder, so bad man,
Yeah, I mean, Joe and Arnold promoted bodybuilding into being from when I started bodybuilding, let me just tell you, if you were a bodybuilder, people thought you were a weirdo. It was like that. They're like, I remember when I started in bodybuilding when I was a teenager, my father's friend was a butcher. And he goes, you don't want to be a meathead. Don't do that. You don't want to become a meathead. That's what he kept calling me, a meathead. Mm-hmm. and I didn't give a shit what this guy said, but it was like if you were in bodybuilding, they automatically assumed you were gay, and they automatically assumed that that you're just a retard of some sort. That's just
interesting. In Germany, when I grew up and I started bodybuilding in 2009, it was kind of the same. Like people thought you were weird. They were like, "What's wrong?" And you probably stupid too. Weird and stupid. Gay, I don't know. Maybe some thought that a little bit because oil and on stage and such, but definitely weird and stupid. And that changed a lot, and especially with Instagram and social media. To be honest, that is really something that elevated the sport and gave people more insights and understanding and less prejudice, like it always is. People have always all these biases and prejudices until they actually talk to the person, because they paint a picture in their heads of everything that's foreign. And once they know it, they're like, oh, actually, that's not what I expected. Yeah. So, yeah, that's even till not so, almost recently, it was like that over in Germany. And when I came to the States first, I was surprised. Like I was in New York and I lived there. And a lot of people on the streets were like asking me for advice or like complimenting me and such. That's never, ever happened in Germany, ever. Like crazy. And I think that's even getting better now in Germany. So in the gyms, people would come to you. On the street, that never happened to me, but we're getting there. So I think we should also see the good sides. I mean, there's a bunch of bad sides. Oh my God, like some gyms are just tripod, like, what do you call that?
Social media scenes.
You have to zigzag around the tripods, It's like, Tough Mudder through tripods.
Well, one thing that some people might not understand because things are different now with everything being so spread out. But back then, Wieder headquarters was in Woodland Hills, California, which was in San Fernando Valley, a suburb of Los Angeles. Golds and Worlds were in Los Angeles. West Hollywood was right there, which was like gay man central.
Yeah.
A lot of bodybuilders lived there. And by the way, Lacey Rich, gay guy named Lacey Rich was our apartment manager, and he gave us cheap rent so we could live there for cheap as bodybuilders because he liked having bodybuilders around. So I think there was quite a few bodybuilders actually living in our complex right there. And there was a huge gay influence in bodybuilding. I mean, this is a real thing. When the bodybuilders would train at Gold's back in the day, the gay men would stand in the window for hours and just stare through the window and watch them train. This is no bullshit. When I was a teenager competing, every single time I competed, I got propositioned to go do a naked photo shoot every single time. I remember the first time I walked off a stage in San Diego and this guy comes up to me and he's like, I want to shoot your pictures. And I'm like, he's like, I'll pay you $1,000. And that was a lot of money back. I'm like, $1,000? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, I'm thinking like, why does this guy want to pay me $1,000? He could have just taken my pictures right now on stage. I was just up there, posing. And he goes, I want to do it in my apartment. I'm not my apartment, my hotel room. And I'm like, in my posing trunks. He goes, well, maybe without the trunks. I'm like, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
I just wasn't not into that.
Yeah, it's good, man. They would like be around now and you'd be like, oh my God, what did I do for $1,000 back then?
Yeah.
So yeah. Good choice.
And even years later, there was a guy who, I shouldn't say there was a guy. There is a guy that goes to all the national shows and photographs all the bodybuilders backstage and on stage, and he sends you free pictures. And every time I competed in a national event, whether USA's or nationals, this Tony guy who's always there, and he always took my pictures for years and years, and he would send them to me, not charge me a dime. Well, the very last time he filmed me, he goes, "Let's go outside and do it." And I'm like, "Why?" And he goes, "Let's just do it outside, like on the grass." And I'm like, "Okay." I mean, he's been shooting me for years. I didn't think anything of it. And he goes, "Let's do something more artistic." I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, lay down on the ground and like put your head like this and do this." I'm like, "No, I'm not going to do that." Like, "No, dude, I'm not. That's some weird shit." Like, "No, And he got kind of mad because, he had been shooting me for years and giving me free photographs, not charging me anything. And all of a sudden now he's wanting me to do weird shit. And I'm just like, no.
Yeah. But you can also argue that he had 0 photographs if he wouldn't have the models. So,
yeah. But yeah, he would always be there shooting. He'd probably still going to this day, as far as I know.
Now he's just shooting for himself.
Yeah, I'm just saying, but he'd take pictures and he'd send them to you, and he didn't charge you anything.
Maybe nowadays he's zooming directly into the crotch with the super zoom on the back shots.
Yeah, I don't know.
Don't keep their asses together, and he's like, "Oh yeah."
Somebody asked, "How does Linda Murray stay feminine and not change her voice?" I don't know. I think it's just genetic. Like even what's the name of the lady that just won the Olympia for again?
Yeah.
The black girl.
Andrea Shaw.
I mean, Andrea Shaw has her face is just now starting to get a little distorted. Just now, the last year, I noticed it's a little distorted. The cheekbones are a little more prominent. I think that's from the GH. But for the most part, she's had a feminine looking face, even with all that muscle and conditioning. She's managed to keep a feminine face, and I don't really notice her voice being very deep. So I think it's just genetics. Some people just are affected differently.
When you look at her muscle bellies and everything, you'll be like, she also has way more talent than all of the others. So much more.
Yeah, I think genetically.
She's kind of a Phil Heath in female.
Yeah, it was just easier for her to build muscle like that.
You can just tell she just has this. You can see the muscle bellies. It's just like Phil Heath as a female.
Yeah,
it's just perfect. Like she's really, really good. Like she was only a little bit close to losing because she wasn't in shape. But if she's in shape, like no one comes close. They can all stay home. But there's a new black girl. She's pretty dangerous. She wasn't actually that in that great of shape, but she got 3rd, I think, or 2nd even. Did you see her?
Yeah,
very thick back.
Didn't she win the show that you just did?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, she did. She won the show you just did. I can't think of her name, but yeah, she's short but really thick.
Yeah, really thick. So if she gets shredded, okay, then close.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to mention, I've known about Arthur Jones for back since Mentzer used to tell me stories about him. But just in preparing for this video, because I knew I was going to do it, I started watching some old Arthur Jones videos, and some of them I'd seen before, but some of them I haven't. And you guys just take a look back at some of the stuff, because if you consider the era when he started, when this was all like brand new, it's mind-blowing the stuff he came up with. The guy literally was a real genius when it comes to understanding muscle physiology, anatomy, the weight, biomechanics, and all that. He was ahead of his time.
Yeah.
And the way he explains things, it's pretty wild. And
the guy's asking for a perfect optimal TRT dose. You have to get your blood work, dude. So some people have a 1200 on 100 tests a week, and some people have a 1200 on 200 tests a week. So that's not possible to tell you. It's definitely not 500, if you want to know that. And it's probably not 50.
Yeah,
So,
you really can't say that because, like Leo just said, people respond differently. Like I can take 200 milligrams of test and I have a 1200 and my free test is like 500 to 600 on 200
wow.
milligrams of test.
Yeah.
I just had my blood work done like last week.
What would you think is the best number? I think, to be honest, like 1,000 is a good number. 1,000 I would say, if I'm just wanted to do TRT, I would go upper range, like 1,000 or 1,100.
Well, okay, so here's the problem with the TRT scale. If you traditionally back in like the 80s, the average man had a testosterone range of like over 800, 800 to 1,200. Nowadays, the average man's testosterone range is like 400 or less.
Yeah, so the range nowadays is 290 to 980 is kind of the range they have, right? So I'm saying if I'm doing TRT now, if I would do TRT like for life, I would go probably 1,000 or 1,200, because I think like you say, a little bit like upper end of range or a little over is actually optimal for a man, how to feel, perform, and it's not going to have detrimental health effects. So that's where I would go.
Yeah, I think around 1,000 is probably good for most people, but how much testosterone takes you to get to there, it's different depending on
exactly.
How you process it. And your SBGH, the higher your SBGH, the less free testosterone you're going to have. My SBGH is really low, so my free testosterone tends to be pretty high.
I mean SHBG.
SHBG.
Yeah.
And anyways, I did get the blood work drawn. I went to Quest and I got it drawn there through Private MD. I already got those results back. I had a problem the first time I used the kit, the
Rhythm Health,
because I stuck it on my arm and no blood came out.
Mm.
And after 15 minutes, I started messaging the company, and I'm like, it's stuck on my arm, and I pushed the button like 5 times, no blood came out. So they said it was a defective device, so they sent me another one, and I just drew my blood 2 days ago and mailed it in. So, and I'm waiting for the result.
This guy is 50 and is at 670. Should I go on TRT, and will I still produce tests naturally if I bring it to 1,000? No, you won't. So as soon as you put something in, your body recognizes it and shuts itself down. So if you feel great at 670, I wouldn't do anything.
Yeah, because you will shut yourself down. And the problem with if you're at 50 and you're at 670 is a pretty good level to be at. And if you do go on TRT for any period of time, you'll probably turn your testosterone off permanently.
And then you might never get back to 670. Maybe if you're lucky to 400 or so. Yeah,
you'll have to permanently take testosterone for the rest of your life.
So I would not do it unless you feel like total dog crap.
Yeah.
And that's the reason. And are you even exploring everything to optimize your testosterone naturally? Maybe you can even
if your
optimize it
more. Is naturally 670 at 50, I would even take some enclomiphene and see if you can just boost it that way, maybe with some HCG. You probably don't need to take hormone replacement therapy to do that.
I would take nothing. I would look at like maybe he can even improve his sleep a bit, take some supplements, or improve his free testosterone, take a little boron, whatever he like. Maybe he hasn't maxed out all the natural ways to get his testosterone up. I mean, there's some things, maybe, I don't know, what is his food like? Does he eat enough egg yolks and fat and good fats? Who knows? Maybe he has like even room to improve it naturally to a 750, 800.
Well, definitely 670 is not a bad number to be at.
Yeah.
At your age, considering, that you're not taking any testosterone.
Yeah, that's even like 30-year-olds at 670 is not that bad, so that's pretty good. Yeah.
Does getting a young hot girlfriend boost your T levels? I have a young hot girlfriend, and no, if I don't take testosterone, then my levels will not be anywhere.
I mean, it could. I don't know. It could. Not like crazy, but if you're at 500 and you get a hot young girlfriend, and maybe you get it to 550. I don't know, but
yeah, but not if you're shut down from taking steroids.
Not like a TRT replacement. You can't do a hot girlfriend instead of TRT. That's not going to happen. That would be awesome, huh? Big Pharma would hate it.
Yeah.
But the young girlfriends, you don't want to talk to them nowadays. That's the whole issue in our society, man. The girls are so on one side, and the men that are just a little bit conservative are like, oh my God, like I have nothing here to work with. For real. I feel bad. I'm so blessed. I'm married. Like, I feel bad for everyone to find someone. You're like, oh, she's hot. Let's talk. And you talk to her and she's like, oh my God, she's a nut job. And you'd be like, for real, like, how long can you keep a nut job at home? Like
that. I agree with you, but I will just say this. There's still a few good ones out there.
Yeah. You have to probably go to the gym or church.
Yeah.
Either one. So, yeah. Not very Christian to look for women at church, but better that way. God wants your children. So, yeah, I moved to Vegas, but I got a Minnesotan woman.
No, I got lucky. I got a good one right now, but I met her in the gym. So
yeah, me too. See.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. I think we covered this, and obviously, if you have more questions about it, one thing I just want to say that John Little made reference in his thing. He said, "I wasn't there, so I don't know exactly what happened, but I don't believe what Larry said." Okay, Mike was a friend of mine. I looked up to him. I have no reason to. Why would I make up this story? Like, it's like does nothing for me. I'm not getting paid to do this.
Yeah. And you lived with him.
Yeah. He was my roommate.
That's significant. You know way more about a person when you lived with them.
Yeah. And
just friends with them.
The only reason I talked about it is because I don't know, I was talking about Mike and somebody asked me, and I guess I'm too honest. I just told the truth.
Yeah.
Just what happened.
Yeah.
I wasn't like judging him about it or anything. It is what it is. And from what I know of our circumstance at the time, I think Mike just really needed money.
Yeah.
And I think that, and maybe the meth, maybe just had him do things maybe he normally wouldn't do.
Oh yeah, dude. People, when they're addicted, they do whatever to get the money to get the drugs.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, he did what he had to do to get the money he thought he needed.
Yeah.
And so I never thought Mike was gay and like that way. I just think that, he was hooked on drugs and he needed money. And that was the easiest way to get it. And you see it a lot right now in the women bodybuilders. I mean, they've got these, what they call schmoes, or they're just rich sugar daddy guys. They don't even like them, but they don't have to work. They pay for everything.
Yeah. Oh, Anthony, it sounded the direct opposite. Okay. Anthony believes you, but this first answer sounds like you're lying.
Oh. Well, okay. I got no reason to lie about it. I
know.
Dude, I can tell you before I trained with Mike, I trained with Gaspari. I trained with Lee Haney. I didn't train with Bertle Fox, but I trained in the same gym where he trained, and I watched all their training. But Mike had the biggest influence on my training.
Yeah.
Because, he actually took the time to train with me and taught me how to do it. And it just all made sense to me.
Yeah. If I can say one thing about you is, even if I disagree with you sometimes or someone else, I can, like, I might be the worst judge in the world, but I feel you always say what's on your mind, and you're always honest. Like, guys, if you think Larry's making up stuff, whatever he's saying, he's believing. Like, trust me. Like, yeah.
I got no reason to make up a story.
Also, if you know Larry's story, what he's been through, like, he's not afraid to say the truth about little things like that. So that would be hilarious. Yeah, but
yeah, you know what? The guy said something like, after I'd been to prison, and then Mike did something gay, and I was freaked out about it, as if like, why would I be shocked about that after I'd been to prison and seen all these things? I wasn't shocked. I was just like, really, dude? Like, I was more disappointed, to be honest with you, because it's like, you're my buddy, and I look up to you, and now you're doing this, you know?
Yeah.
It wasn't a shock. It was more like, damn, seriously?
Yeah.
Like,
it's sad.
Yeah, I was like, it literally, I was sad. I was like, this is what you become? Like, look, Tom Platz, when I was growing up, when I was 13, I met him a week before the 81 Olympia. He gave me his leg training manual and his upper body training manual. And then I watched him guest pose. And to me, he was like a god. I so looked up to that guy. And years later, I found out he's working as a used car dealer because he broke and he needed money. And then I found out he's working for an equipment reseller. And I actually went and bought some equipment from them just to help him out. I felt bad because it's like, this guy was like a legend in 81. He should have won the 81 Olympia. And, you know, now he's like scraping by trying to do odd jobs just to get a few bucks. And I'm not saying anything negative about Tom. I'm just like, he went from a superstar to, you know, broke and just trying to get money, you know?
Yeah, when you see just your idols fall, it's sad, of course. Yeah, because like they were your gods, and now you're like, you have to help them. That's kind of like contradicting itself. Like the God should be like the guy who's helping me, who's like bringing me up, and now I'm like here and like my God has fallen, kind of, you know. So yeah, totally get that. And it's sad. It's just sad. It's sad any time if someone gets, you know, worse, but it's especially sad if someone was like that high up. And that happens.
But
all right.
I think we covered it all.
Yeah.
So if you have any questions, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this so more people can see it. Do I still follow my routines to these days? I actually do. I've been, ever since I trained with Mike, I pretty much trained that way. I can say the only difference between my training now and training then is I do a few more exercises, but I still work up to the one high intensity set to failure with force reps and negatives or a drop set or something like that. I still have one all out set at the end of my sets. So yeah, I'm still training the same way. And it worked for me. And I've tried other ways too, by the way. I've tried more volume. I just like it. Yeah. All right. Let's wrap it up. And again, guys, leave your comments. If you have anything, you can reach us both on Instagram, or you can reach me through the gym email. And that's a wrap.
Have a good one, guys. And just go back to the front and rewatch it, because you have some questions that were already answered. So
yeah, we did answer some stuff about Arthur Jones that you guys maybe missed. So check out the beginning of the video.
Bye, Larry. Very interesting today. History.
I believe that the fires were cast upon, on the flames we shall become. I believe in a common cause.